And thank you for joining me here. I'm Don Ma. So we have a few updates on China's property sector and the typhoon in Hong Kong later in the show. But first, just an overview of markets. S&P 500 ended higher on Friday after a jump in unemployment. It cemented expectations of a pause in interest rate hikes this month. But shares of streaming firms tumbled due to a rate dispute between Disney and Charter Communications, but more on Disney and Charter in a bit. Traders actually see a 93% chance the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates unchanged at its meeting later this month. And this is according to CME's Fed Watch tool. And Biden's latest effort to boost the country's EV productions. The Energy Department announced $12 billion in grants and loans to the industry. The money will be used to convert existing factories into plants that make hybrid and electric vehicles. The Biden administration says the move will help auto workers keep jobs in their communities. That's as the White House pursues policies designed to reduce gas-powered cars and increase EVs. The announcement comes as President Biden seeks the endorsement of the United Auto Workers Union. So far, the UAW has declined to support his re-election. Meanwhile, another $4 billion in funding for FEMA. That's what President Biden is asking from Congress. That amount is on top of the $12 billion request he made last month. It also comes days after Hurricane Idalia wreaked havoc on Florida and several other states. FEMA's disaster relief fund is already running out of money for the year, with disasters that also include the Maui wildfires. The federal government says there have been 15 weather-related disasters that have each exceeded $1 billion in damages. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says passing more disaster funds for FEMA is the #1 priority. And staying with the Biden administration, it's proposing a new gun control rule that would close the so-called gun show loophole. It would essentially classify any American who sells guns for profit as a firearms dealer, and it's going to require them to do criminal background checks. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the proposed measure.
The White House proposed changes to the definition of a firearms dealer in a statement Thursday. At present, individuals can sell firearms for profit without having to be a registered firearm dealer. Federal law does not require unlicensed private firearms sellers to do background checks on gun buyers. The new rule was proposed by the DOJ. It would classify gun sales under business activities, requiring sellers to have a license and run background checks. Executive branch agencies can issue rules and regulations to clarify how laws should be implemented. The proposal is in its comment period before being finalized. The rule builds on gun control measures passed last year after the Uvalde school shooting. The bipartisan Safer Communities Act expanded the definition of engaging in the business of firearms dealing to cover all people who devote time, attention, and labor to dealing in firearms as a regular course of trade or business to predominantly earn a profit. And President Biden signed an executive order in March that further expanded the definition of an arms dealer. He said it was to get the country as close to universal background checks as possible without congressional action. The new proposal aims to end what the White House calls the gun show loophole, or internet loophole, referring to firearms sales at gun shows or at online marketplaces by unlicensed dealers. It would have little chance of making it through a Republican-controlled House and would have needed GOP support to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. Now, the Biden administration says an individual will be assumed to be engaging in firearms sales if they create a website or make business cards to advertise a firearms business, maintain records that track the profits and losses from the sale of guns, or buy business insurance or rent space at a gun show. The new definitions will not apply to people that sell guns that don't have the aim of making money, such as selling a gun no longer needed to a family member or as a collectible for a hobby. Many Second Amendment advocates say the administration's new gun rules could essentially outlaw private firearm transfers and are likely to challenge it in court. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
And it seems like the annual cost of owning and operating a new car has soared to new heights. AAA says the average cost this year is $12,182 annually, or $1,015 a month. That's a big jump from 2022, when the average cost was just $10,782 a year. The increase is being driven in part by record high vehicle prices and a 90% jump in finance rates. New car prices are up nearly $1,600 since last year. Fuel was one of the higher annual cost categories compared to 2022. However, this year's average cost per mile has gone down by roughly 2 cents. EV charging has also gotten more expensive. Additionally, automakers have been making more oversized, luxurious, and pricey vehicles with extra features that do add to the price increase. U.S. consumer spending increased by the most in 6 months in July as Americans bought more goods and services, but slowing monthly inflation rates cemented expectations that the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates unchanged next month. Here's more.
U.S. consumer spending, which has been resilient despite inflation, increased by the most in 6 months in July, another sign the economy was gathering momentum. That's according to data out Thursday from the Commerce Department that showed Americans shelled out for groceries, clothing, and household furnishings, and continued to spend at bars and restaurants, in addition to health care and investment advice services. Consumer spending is the biggest driver of the U.S. economy, accounting for 2/3 of all economic activity. It's been supported by a still tight labor market, although there are signs that's starting to cool, as job openings in July dropped to their lowest level in 2.5 years. Thursday's report also showed inflation remained in check. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or PCE, rose 0.2% last month, matching June's level. That lifted hopes the Federal Reserve could keep interest rates where they are next month. But the so-called core PCE, the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, rose slightly to 4.2% on an annual basis in July. It rose 4.1% year over year in June.
Meanwhile, the start of September brings big changes to food stamp eligibility. Now policies for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, are in place. Basically, more low-income Americans will be required to work in order to receive food stamps. Able-bodied adults up to 50 years old who don't have kids will now have to show proof they are working at least 80 hours a month, or that they are enrolled in an education or training program to receive SNAP. In October, that age requirement will increase to 52 years old. And homeless people, veterans, and adults up to 24 years old who aged out of foster care are exempt from the new mandates. And Disney on Thursday night blocked ESPN and ABC from being shown on Charter's Spectrum network. Disney and Charter failed to secure a distribution agreement, but it seems like disagreements over carriage fees are actually not new, especially as cord cutting and streaming have eaten into the traditional cable business. An AI experiment in the world of sports news is on pause. Multiple outlets are stopping the artificial intelligence project after mistakes and glitches in articles. Here are the details.
Gannett is the parent company for USA Today and various local newspapers. Axios reports that some of Gannett's papers participated in an experiment where they let artificial intelligence, or AI, write sports articles. That project has reportedly been stopped after criticism from readers. The paper which came under the spotlight the most was the Columbus Dispatch. For example, earlier this month, the Dispatch reportedly published a story where the system didn't correctly insert mascots' names. The article included the sentence, "The Worthington Christian winning team mascot defeated the Westerville North losing team mascot 2-1. The story has since been corrected. A spokesperson for Gannett told Fox News that it has halted its AI experiment and that it will continue to evaluate vendors as we refine processes to ensure all the news and information we provide meets the highest journalistic standards. Lead AI is the software company which was used by Gannett for this experiment. The company's CEO told Fox that they were working to fix the problems, saying, "As with any new technological advance, some glitches can occur. We sincerely regret that a very small number of the 1,000+ articles we produced for Gannett newspaper sites on August 19th included some errors. We immediately launched an around-the-clock effort to correct the problems and made the appropriate changes. Some in the media business previously praised AI, saying it might even replace real journalists. Meanwhile, in related news, the co-founder of Google DeepMind, Mustafa Suleyman, had strong words on Friday regarding NVIDIA's AI technology. NVIDIA is the leading maker of chips used for AI, according to Investors.com. Suleyman told the Financial Times the U.S. should allow NVIDIA chip sales only to buyers who agree to ethically use the technology, saying the U.S. should mandate that any consumer of NVIDIA chips signs up to at least the voluntary commitments, and more likely more than that. The U.S. is already restricting sales of such chips to China and some countries in the Middle East.
Elon Musk says his oldest child was turned into a communist after attending a Los Angeles school. He says the child now hates him for being rich. Musk made the comments for his upcoming biography, some of which was published in the Wall Street Journal. In it, he blames Los Angeles private school Crossroads, at least partially, for their strained relationship. Musk's oldest child is biologically male, but began identifying as transgender at 16 years old. Musk says the child then broke off all contact with him and became a fervent Marxist. The biography excerpt says Musk's current beliefs come from his experience with Xavier, who now goes by the name Jenna. He says this relationship is the most painful experience in his life since his first child died as an infant. And summer vacations are coming to an end, and that means heading back to the office. Or does it? Bankrate reports that more than half of Americans who prefer remote or hybrid work are willing to find another job to keep that flexibility. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on employment preferences that could usher in a new era of work.
One legacy of the pandemic has been the rise and endurance of hybrid and remote work. A 4-day work week is also gaining traction. Bankrate reports nearly 90% of Americans favor one of these new work trends.
The fact that I'm sitting where I am is an indication of that. So for those who had the flexibility, those who had the technology and the means to work remote, that's part of the world that has changed over the last several years.
This interview was done via Zoom, but many Americans aren't able to do their jobs remotely. Pilots, first responders, and service industry workers need to show up in person. More than 80% of survey respondents support another option.
In those situations where those individuals cannot work remote or hybrid virtually at all, they might be seeking the flexibility in terms of a 4-day work week.
But employers have raised concerns about remote and hybrid work.
There is no doubt that one of the concerns about this has been right at the top of the list, productivity. In other words, are workers more productive, less productive, or about the same if they're working remote or fully remote or hybrid? And I think the jury's still out on that.
Many large companies are requiring workers to come back to the office, at least for a few days a week. But Bankrate's survey reveals 68% of respondents prefer hybrid and remote work, and 73% of those workers are willing to make a change to get it.
Can you have the same kind of a culture as we would have had in the past when everybody was in the office all of the time? And I think this is part of the evolving landscape that we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to.
Remote and hybrid work could save time and money.
You don't spend as much time commuting to the workplace. And in an environment as we've had here over the last month or so, rising gasoline prices, well, that adds insult to injury with respect to commuting costs. And so it's time essentially wasted.
Hamrick believes these preferences are the new normal for now.
But there's also going to be tremendous evolution, whether it's with workplace preferences, work preferences, the way the technology changes the nature of work as we're seeing AI, just the beginning of that.
Employers may have to acquiesce if they want to retain talent. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And the first over-the-counter drug used to reverse opioid overdose is expected in retail stores and online as soon as next week, according to its manufacturer. Here's a look at where the drug will be sold and how much it's going to cost. And now a few stories on China. The first one is, amid China's property crisis, the spotlight is now on developer Country Garden. But who exactly is Country Garden? Well, until this year, Country Garden was the largest Chinese developer by sales. It has 3,103 projects across China. The company matters a lot to the property sector's systemic stability. So it's in a lot of debt as well. But how bad is its financial situation? Country Garden's total liabilities were about $194 billion by the end of June. It faces around $14 billion worth of debts due within 12 months, but its cash levels are only around about $13 billion. And amid China's property troubles, how are its citizens feeling about the real estate sector? Take a look at our next story.
Fears about the economic slowdown are stopping Shanghai residents from buying property, despite a raft of measures rolled out by the Beijing government this week to revive the economy and target the deepening crisis in its massive, debt-riddled property sector, which has been declining since 2021. They include lower mortgage rates for first-time buyers, but they're not enough to tempt residents like freelancer Li Yang.
For now, I wouldn't want to buy a house. To be honest, no matter what policies come out, it won't reach the point where ordinary people would want to buy a house.
Policy easing is pretty crucial.
John Lam, head of China and Hong Kong property at UBS Investment Bank Research, expects more easing measures to be announced soon. But he still believes property transactions will fall by about 15% in the second half of the year.
If the sales continue to decline or do not have material impact from the policy easing, then we may continue to see the price decline here.
Leading developer Country Garden is scrambling to avoid default, and fears of contagion to other property firms are mounting. There are concerns developers may struggle to complete projects. It's not just the cost of borrowing putting buyers off. White-collar workers are taking pay cuts, and unemployment is high. New home prices fell for the fourth month in August, a private survey showed on Friday.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong and China's southeastern coastline prepared for a super typhoon on Friday. Authorities have warned it could rate among the 5 strongest to hit the southern province since 1949. Here's the latest.
Shuttered businesses closed schools and cancelled flights. Hong Kong and China's southeastern coastline prepared for Super Typhoon Saola on Friday, packing winds of more than 125 miles per hour. Issuing their highest typhoon alert, Chinese authorities have warned that Saola could rate among the 5 strongest to hit the southern province since 1949. Hong Kong officials have further warned of storm surges 10 feet higher than the normal tide. The super typhoon is expected to skirt within 60 miles of Hong Kong.
I'm very worried because the news and the Hong Kong Observatory have both reported that this typhoon is a super typhoon. And after seeing the typhoon's path map online, we can see that the eye of the typhoon will pass very close to Hong Kong. So I'm a bit concerned and I hope it won't cause too many casualties.
No, I don't have any particular emotions, and I haven't made any special preparations. Typhoons occur every year in Hong Kong, so maybe this one is just larger than usual. I'm living in the upper area, so there won't be much happening. But if I lived here by the sea, then I would be afraid.
Bracing for the storm, schools in Hong Kong, Shenzhen and Guangzhou have been closed and rail services suspended. While in Shenzhen, a city of more than 17 million, businesses and financial markets were suspended from Friday afternoon. Saola is one of 3 tropical cyclones to form in the northwest Pacific Ocean and South China Sea.
Meanwhile, 4 Chinese tech firms, including Baidu and SenseTime Group, on Thursday launched their artificial intelligence chatbots to the public after receiving approval. This is as Beijing pushes to widen the use of these products amid competition with the United States. Here's more.
ChatGPT sparked a global race to harness the power of artificial intelligence. Now the Microsoft-backed sensation may be about to get some serious new rivals from China. Beijing on Thursday allowed the public release of several chatbots. Perhaps the most prominent is Ernie, made by Baidu, the country's top search engine provider. It was originally launched earlier in the year, but hadn't been made available to the public. Unlike other countries, China requires companies to receive clearance before releasing mass-market AI products. But authorities are now stepping up efforts to help domestic firms as AI becomes a focus of competition with the US. Other companies to launch approved products on Thursday include SenseTime Group and 2 startups. Local media reports say 11 firms in all got the green light. That reportedly includes TikTok owner ByteDance and gaming giant Tencent. Some reports said e-commerce titan Alibaba did not win government approval for its own product. The news comes after US media reports that ChatGPT maker OpenAI is on track to earn $1 billion over the next year. That number is only likely to spur efforts to win the global AI race.
And are you traveling this Labor Day weekend? Well, pack your patience and expect packed crowds at airports and busy roads. According to AAA, more people are traveling over this holiday compared to last year. This is as Hurricane Idalia is already delaying and canceling hundreds of flights. Here's what you can expect.
If you're heading out of town over the long Labor Day weekend, travel experts say expect busy airports, packed roads, and long lines to get to your holiday destination.
There's reason to expect that Labor Day will look very similar to pre-pandemic, if not higher.
And according to a AAA forecast, Labor Day weekend travel will be up 4% over last year domestically. And while that's notable, experts say it's the increase in international bookings for Labor Day weekend that's jaw-dropping. Those bookings are up 44% over 2022. Travel expert Scott Kai says it may be because people are feeling safer to travel abroad.
This is the first summer that they felt comfortable doing so, and we have essentially 3 years of pent-up demand for international travel.
The TSA says Friday will be the biggest in terms of the number of passengers. It comes as Hurricane Idalia disrupts flights, triggering hundreds of cancellations and delays and forcing at least 2 airports to shut down operations.
Safety is paramount, and we have to ensure that we're protecting our employees and airport infrastructure that could be damaged by wind or water.
Meanwhile, for people hitting the road, gas prices are slightly less than they were at the same time last year. As of Wednesday afternoon, the national gas price average was $3.82, about 5 cents less than last year.
And finally, according to new data released Friday, the U.S. economy added 187,000 jobs in August. This is slightly more than expected. And this number is similar to last month's job gains, although the July total was revised down to 157,000 jobs. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the August number is still a slowdown from the past 2 years of massive job growth. It coincides with the Federal Reserve's continuing efforts to bring down inflation without triggering mass joblessness. The unemployment rate went up to 3.8% from 3.5%. Economists were actually expecting to see job gains of around 170,000 and the unemployment rate to hold steady. And here with me now is Julia Pollock, Chief Economist at ZipRecruiter. So Julia, 187,000 jobs added. Expectations were actually lower than that. So what's the story here today with this month's jobs report?
It's a good, strong number. It's exactly in line with the 2015 to 2019 average, which was 190,000 jobs. Job growth remains broad-based. Of course, it's led by healthcare, which is what we would expect to see over the long haul. And this report really marks a return to normal in the labor market.
So this is a little bit lower than the average amount before. What is there to say about that?
Well, given demographic changes since the pandemic, we actually would expect the run rate to be even lower now. And so this number is better in relative terms than the period before the pandemic.
All right, and the unemployment rate, of course, went up 0.3%. Is quite a bit of a jump there, isn't it?
It is, but it went up for good reasons. Now, if in the coming months those new participants are not absorbed quickly, that could be a sign of concern and of too much slowing in the labor market. For now, we're not yet there. The magical threshold in the labor market is really sort of 4% unemployment. When unemployment is below that level, then we see a lot of good things happen in the labor market. Participation tends to increase, and gaps, gender gaps, racial gaps in the labor market, in employment gains and in wage growth actually tend to reverse and narrow.
Right, 3.8 is historically still a low number. But what factors contributed, do you think, into this uptick in unemployment?
The main factor here was a large increase in labor force participation. So the labor force expanded in this report by over 700,000 workers. Many are coming back now that schools are, in a better position. They're not fully staffed yet, but they're doing a bit better. Childcare services are gaining jobs. Nursing homes are increasingly reopening and are getting better. And so many people who stepped out of the labor force due to childcare are actually able to come back now in larger numbers.
And 187,000 jobs, this is more than enough for entrance into the economy, new entrants, right?
Yes, this is... We would expect about 70,000 to 100,000 jobs added each month to be enough to keep the unemployment rate low and to still create a few opportunities for new entrants. Instead, we're seeing a number almost twice as high, and that's good news for job seekers and workers.
And there's some moderation as well in wage growth. What's your angle there?
So we've been seeing this in our marketplace. Wages posted in job ads have been trending downwards in many industries and occupations. And it appears that employers are trying to get a handle on cost growth and reset expectations among workers. They increasingly expect workers to negotiate their offers. There's been a bit of a culture shift since the pandemic. Workers increasingly know that they have bargaining power, they have alternatives. And so I think employers are trying to come in low to give themselves maximal runway to negotiate. That is causing wages overall to slow a little bit, but they're still growing faster than inflation.
Do you think it has any relation to the number of available positions for every worker? I think we're at somewhere around 1.5 now.
Absolutely. So the number of openings has fallen and the number of participants has increased. The average employer on ZipRecruiter is now getting about 40% more applications per posting than they did a year ago. That means it's slightly easier for them to fill vacancies. It's a bit harder for job seekers to find jobs. And so some of the balance of power has shifted back to employers.
Yeah, and with wage growth moderating perhaps slightly and unemployment ticking up a little bit higher, do you think this is welcome news for the Federal Reserve?
Absolutely. I think they are high-fiving in the break room today about this report. It very much is sort of a Goldilocks report. It shows the economy in a sweet spot. If this is sustained, I think that would be very good news for the U.S. workforce, with an economy not overheating, with a Fed not under pressure to raise rates further, but with a labor market still creating good, solid jobs.
So on that note, do you think the Fed has tightened enough?
Yes, I mean, if anything, I was worried that they might have over-tightened. The number of online job postings is all the way back to its pre-pandemic level. The pace of decline and of slowing in the labor market has been quite rapid in the last 3 months, and that caused many observers to worry that perhaps the pendulum would swing too far. It hasn't yet. We're still in that sweet spot, and let's hope it stays that way.
So is it clear now that the labor market has slowed from its peak? Because as well, June and July was revised down by a total of 110,000 jobs.
Yes, no, this pretty much all the data now is converging. The private sector data, the public sector data, it all is pointing to a slowing labor market, but that is not slowing too much. That has merely come back to normal, back to the sort of pre-pandemic labor market conditions, which were good and strong for job seekers and workers, pretty challenging for employers, but only to the extent that they encouraged employers to make investments in productivity improving technologies and to improve the quality of the jobs they were offering.
And maybe just one question about the job openings report a couple of days ago. Employers posted 8.8 million job openings. What's your thoughts there?
Well, that's still about 3 million more than the number of unemployed workers. So there's still plenty of opportunities, around 26% more openings than before the pandemic. That said, that number has come down very quickly by more than 2 million in just the last 3 months. That's the fastest decline pretty much ever. And so I think there is reason to be sort of cautiously optimistic, but also to be aware that it is possible that the long and variable lag of monetary policy through credit channels could put the squeeze on U.S. consumers in the coming months and slow activity. And so I think the Fed should be vigilant and alert and pay attention to what's happening and make sure that they ease off on the brakes before we experience too much pain.
Sure, and we have to factor in as well student loan repayments are about to start. That could put a bit more pressure on consumer spending as well. But just one final question. Is the labor market seeing more slack? Because 1.5 openings per every person looking, down from close to 2 openings per person looking before.
Absolutely. So the labor leverage ratio has declined and shows that workers have lost some leverage. The ratio of openings to unemployed workers has fallen quite substantially. It's still much higher than before the pandemic, though. And so that slackening largely just reflects a return to more balanced labor market conditions. The labor market is a tricky market. This is, job search is never easy. It typically requires applying to many positions, going through the pain of rejections, preparing for multiple interviews. And that is the sort of painful human condition that we are returning to after a period of unprecedented, speedy growth in the labor market.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. But thank you so much today, Julia. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Good speaking with you too. Thanks.